What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Kevin Jackwitz. This is the Caged Review, and this is a review for Game of Thrones Season 8. We're finally at Season 8, Episode 1. And, it's been built up quite a bit. I don't know that I've been this excited for a series or a movie or anything like that. Maybe ever, dude. I mean, this has been huge. It's been a huge build-up. And I think because of that huge build-up, this episode wasn't necessarily what I was looking for. Not to say that it wasn't great. It had some very, very amazing moments. And you start off right away. You have the big return to Winterfell. Jon and Dany coming back to Winterfell. And it starts out with this kid. He's walking through a crowd of people, climbs up a tree, sees this huge line of soldiers moving forward. You see it's the Unsullied. Dany and Jon are in the middle. The dragons are flying overhead. They go right over Sansa. Arya sees them too. They're both like, holy shit. So it was really cool, and right away you start getting, combinations of conversations with people from Dany's side, talking to people at Winterfell. First thing you see is like Tyrion talking to Sansa, and Tyrion had made mention of Cersei bringing, the Lannister army up north to fight beside them, and Sansa's like, you actually believe that she's actually going to do that? I thought you were the smart Lannister. And so it was really kind of smart the way they did that, because it shows, Sansa's pretty smart now. She understands what people are really about, what they're really going to do. Another cool meeting you had right away was Arya and Jon. They had this big get-together, big embrace. And Arya says one thing to Jon that was like, you're our family, don't forget that, because he's with Dany now. From there, you get Qyburn, who tells Cersei that the wall has fallen and now the walkers are moving toward the north. And so Cersei's just smiling at that news. And you kind of wonder what's really going on in Cersei's head, but either way, she's smiling, she's happy about it, and then they cut away. You see Euron's Iron Fleet coming back with the gold cloaks. And Euron and Yara are having a short conversation on his ship where Euron and Yara, Yara's like, you chose the losing side. And Euron's like, I really don't care. I just want to fuck the queen, essentially. I don't know. But then, a really cool moment. Bronn, he's in a room with three chicks. He's doing his thing. Qyburn interrupts and says that there is a bunch of gold waiting for her. And essentially, the short version is Cersei is hiring Bronn to kill her brothers, Jaime and Tyrion. And so she hands him the crossbow that Tyrion had killed his dad with. And so, I don't know, man. Like, I'd like to believe that Bronn's not, that type of guy. Like, he's going to stand by Tyrion and Jaime, but you never know. I mean, he's a sellsword. He's showing that he's kind of despicable in a way, so you just don't know. Then you get Euron and Cersei. Euron, he's got the captain of the Golden Cloaks there, and so, he's like, so what's in it for me now? And Cersei is like, when the war's over, he's like, well, I'm getting into a point now where you're kind of losing my interest. I've brought you your revenge. I brought you the Golden Army, the Iron Fleet, and I've got nothing to show for anything that I've done so far. And so Cersei, she walks kind of toward away from the main hall, looks back at Euron, and basically acknowledges like, all right, you've done your part, come on. And so they go get it on, basically. So while Euron is with Cersei, you have Theon. You see a bunch of arrows flying to, a bunch of guys on Euron's ship, and they're all just falling dead. And then the door opens to where Yara's at, and Theon walks through. And it was kind of funny because he grabs the axe out of this dude's head, cuts her rope, and then she like headbutts him to the ground, and then picks him back up, So basically saying, you're a dick for leaving me, but thanks for coming and saving my ass. So that was pretty cool. Then you get Theon and Yara, they're on a ship, and she's talking about taking back the Iron Island since Euron is busy, and Theon wants to go fight at Winterfell, and so Yara says, go ahead, go to Winterfell and go fight. Then you get Tyrion, Varys, and Davos. They're all talking about, the situation with like the Northerners being real stubborn and not willing to partake in, what they got going on with Daenerys, because Daenerys is a foreigner, and they don't like foreigners, especially Southerners. And so the proposal was from Davos Seaworth, an actual proposal, that Jon and Dany get married. And so that way they kind of unify everybody, and I thought that was kind of a good idea. So from there, and you get Dany and Jon there talking about how Sansa hasn't really warmed up to Daenerys at all, and Daenerys is like, I'm still the queen, she still needs to show me respect. So it kind of puts Jon in this really weird situation. But then, really cool scene. They go up to the dragons, and Jon has his first experience riding a dragon. And I really love this scene because they dragged it out a little bit. And it was very cool. They had, Jon being very awkward, both getting on the dragon for the first time, like the crazy way you would like react to riding on a dragon with not much to hold on to. And he's like, tilting to the side and going down this cavern. It was very cool. Very cool scene. Very well shot. Really, really liked it. And then it was funny because they get off the dragons, and Dany's like, we could be here forever, no one would find us, and they're talking about how it's cold and she's cold, and then she's like telling Jon he better warm her up. And it was funny because they start kissing and like making out a little bit, and then both dragons are just dead staring at him, and Jon couldn't get past it. So it was kind of funny. I really liked the way they did that whole thing. Then you get Gendry. He's working dragon glass into an axe for the Hound, so he hands the Hound the axe, and Arya shows up. Hound is like, you left me for dead, and then she's like, yeah, I robbed you first. And then he's like, something like, you're a hard bitch, but I guess that's why you've stayed alive so long. And so it was kind of his fatherly side. And then Gendry and Sansa have not Sansa, but Arya have a moment, and it looks like, maybe sparks are flying between Arya and Gendry. So then you get Sansa and Jon. They're talking about how they need the support, and he left as King of the North, came back with Daenerys, and like just nobody's happy about that. And so they're actually losing people because of that. And Jon was like, well, I brought 2 armies and 2 dragons with me. We couldn't have won this war without Dany. And he makes a valid point. I mean, there's just no way they could get around it. But then Sansa asks, did you bend the knee to save the North or because you love her? Which again is building up this friction. Then you get Dany and Sam. This was actually a really cool moment too. Because Samwell saved Jorah Mormont, and of course he's very close to Dany, so Dany thanks Sam, but then unfortunately has to tell him that she killed his dad and brother, and that was, you could tell that was pretty impactful. He really starts getting emotional. Because she killed his family, whether he liked them or not. They were still his family. So there was that bit. Sam walks outside, excuses himself from Dany, walks into Brandon, who says it's time to tell Jon. So Sam meets Jon in the dungeons where they got the Big Ed statue, the graves, and Sam tells him, you are the king. You are the son of a Targaryen and a Stark, and so you are the rightful heir to the Iron Throne. And he starts talking about all this stuff about how like Ned had to cover it up because he was asked to. And it was a very cool scene, and it's really going to bring a new dynamic as to how Jon and Dany react, because if he tells her, like, who actually is going to step up to take the throne, and who's going to have to either join them in marriage or whatever and be the side note, or, is it going to create a massive conflict? So with that moment, I was on the edge of my seat because, like, that's a big moment for this series. Jon now officially knows who he is. That's a big one. That is a big one. So you get a scene right after that where they're at Eastwatch. You got Tormund and Beric Dondarrion there, and they run into another group of guys. And there's a kid that they had talked to earlier in the show that was supposed to go get his Bannerman for Jon. And he was killed, and the body parts kind of like laid out in a circle by the Night King. And he's basically telling the people at Eastwatch that the army of the dead is between them and the rest of the North. So their plan is to get some horses and go around like all the way like Castle Black and then back around toward Winterfell. And so hopefully the horses last that long, and that's the whole idea, is to get there before the army of the dead does. And then the very last scene of this episode is you see this guy in a hood, he's on horseback, he gets into Winterfell, gets up, pops his hood off, and it's Jaime Lannister, and he's looking around, and instantly he sees Brandon Stark, and Brandon looks at him and smiles, and Jaime Lannister is just like, oh shit, and that's why they cut to credits. So it was a very, very good episode. This episode really is going to set the tone for a lot of things. They had to get this out of the way, I think, because there's going to be a lot of action, a lot of deaths, a lot of craziness going on, and you have that 6 episodes to do it in. So you got one down where they really did all the leading up to. Yara is free. Jon knows who he really is now, Aegon Targaryen. And Jaime's now with the North. You've got the Army of the Dead on the march. So it was big. I really thought it was a big episode. I was kind of hoping they would go for a big kill right off just to set the stage for shock value. I mean, you know it's coming. Let's face it. But I always love it when a series like this just goes for the jugular right off the bat. They didn't go for the jugular. This was very good setup, and it was very good setup. You have a lot of possibilities now that they've created, and you have to figure out like who is really going to be on whose side at the end of this. Bronn, that's a story within itself. Euron, Yara, a lot of cool side stories that are going on, like, what's going to happen with this stuff. And I am really interested to see what Bronn does, because he's been so tied to Jaime and Tyrion, and now Cersei's willing to pay him a lot of money to kill them. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. And I don't know, man. I don't know. There's a lot that could happen. So, that being said, very good show. Very impressed with it. Lots of good writing. I'm going to give this a 7.5 out of 10. I would give it more, but I would have liked to have seen a little bit more initial go for the jugular. So I'm going to give it a 7.5. Still very high. Definitely better than average. I'm quite sure at the end of this, I'm going to have a couple of 10s in here. I mean, you know they're going to kill it. But the anticipation, like from week to week, is going to kill people. Like, it is so intense. Even in this episode, there were a couple of things that were just like, oh my god. Sam getting the gut punch of finding out Dany killed his family. Jon learning that he is Aegon Targaryen. That's a big one. Like, that's a real big one. So, very cool. I was happy with they started out. Not completely ecstatic, I thought they could have dug a little deeper, but it was still very good. I really liked it. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's where I'm at. I'm going to stick with 7.5 out of 10. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If you enjoyed this, hit the like button, subscribe, and share. My name is Kevin Jackwitz. Cage Nation, out.